Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Augmented Leader. This is a mini series designed to help leaders navigate an era where AI is augmenting every aspect of work and sometimes increasingly life itself. Executives are under pressure to implement AI at a competitive yet responsible pace and with measurable results. That balance isn't easy. So, we invited a series of guests who are finding that balance exceptionally well. I am Vijay Narayan, Executive Vice President and Head of Manufacturing, Logistics, Energy and Utilities. I am joined today for our first episode by my dear friend Earl Newsom, CIO of Cummins. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Vijay. I know this is kind of our second time. I had that chance to host you in Detroit and you to come by, and it was a great conversation then. So I look forward to an equally great conversation right now.
So, Earl, our theme today is AI myths to drop and mindsets to adopt for true transformation. Now, I had the pleasure of working with you for multiple years, right? And I can confidently say that you're a multifaceted leader. You have served as a captain of the US Army, been on multiple boards, and have decades of experience in IT leadership. So, for me, you're a perfect big picture thinker on this topic. And I would like to kick off with a conversation that you and I had the last time we actually met. We were talking about stats, and we discussed that 95% of AI use cases stall after the POC stage. But you reframed that statement by saying that you think of it as 95% chances to learn. Why don't you tell our audience about what you actually meant with that statement of yours?
Yeah, thank you very much for starting with that and really beginning to anchor the conversation on myth busting, right? And one of these myths is this one that is floating around and, maybe as a fact, but is indeed a myth, is that 95% of, AI initiatives, fail to produce value. And that's been sort of, shortened down into 95% of AI efforts fail. And I often talk about it this way, and this reframing in this thing is really based upon where we are in the adoption curve of AI. If you think about the Rogers technology adoption curve from, the early adopters, the innovators, early majority, the late majority, and the laggards, right? We're in that early adopter innovator stage, right? And when you think about that early part of that curve and you think about innovation, you begin to reframe this from a failure to a learning. If 90% of my experiments fail, I'm actually learning, right? And so we've adopted, a principle of learn fast, learn forward, learn once, and learn cheaply. If you really look back at it, I mean, in the last 5 years, AI really, took off. I mean, it has its origins in the 1950s, but most recently, transformer models and those things, that's actually just from like 2015 or so, 2018. And then the commercialization of that was 2023. So think about this, the idea of ChatGPT is only 2 years old. Agentic is less than a year. And so we're in the early stages. We need to manage our expectations as we learn where this is going to apply, where we're going to get exponential value from, and not be subject to the myth that 90% of these efforts will fail. And we're not starting to see that now. People are starting to say, well, that was a misnomer. We're actually starting to see value, and busting that particular myth is something that we as technology professionals need to do, educate our business users that we are in that early stage of innovation, and we're learning a lot.
Yeah, and I was just actually hearing our CEO talk, and he was mentioning that right now AI is something you turn on and turn off when you're doing stuff, but very soon it's going to become pervasive, right? I mean, it's like compared to the internet. Internet was something, if you, and both of us were in the 90s, and you remember when we used to actually turn on the internet and then turn it off. It was not pervasive, where it's in everything that you can think of today, and tomorrow AI is going to be the same way.
That's interesting perspective, and let me react to that because I think it's pretty cool, this idea about pervasive AI and AI everywhere. And it reminds me back to the Mark Andreessen quote when he talked about software is eating the world, right? Everything's becoming more software, specific and software centric or software enabled. That is really going to be where AI becomes pervasive, becomes a natural part of everything that we do. And I often talk about IT, and I talk about IT as being the cool kids. And the reason why I talk about we're the cool kids is because software is making hardware cool again. I mean, you think back to, the Nest thermostat. When technology took over the thermostat, it became a house temperature control device, right? When the technology took over the watch, it became a health monitoring capability. When IT and software took over the car, it became a self-driving vehicle, right? And so IT is the engine that's making hardware cool again. Now you add AI on top of that. We're not only making things cool again, we're making them intelligent, right? And so this intelligent, cool things that are being powered by IT and built by professionals who may be listening to this call right now in this podcast, you should be very proud about what we're able to accomplish. And when it becomes pervasive and universal, this intelligent, cool hardware, we can celebrate. But yeah, we actually have won.
Yeah, very well said. But you also believe that the vision of AI, your vision of AI, is for ideas to come from anywhere. They can come from the CEO, the CFO, the shop floor. What does that actually look like in practice?
Well, I think it's going to be quite interesting. And I often think about AI this way, and I think about civilization changing technology, right? The things that have moved civilization forward have been characterized by how we collect and disseminate and create collective intelligence. And so those are the technologies that actually change the way civilization operates. And you go back to language, just the creation of language from grunting to language changes the way that we communicate, share, and create collective intelligence. Now that we can talk and had words, we can actually begin to store and share collective intelligence. That's why we don't have to learn how to recreate fire every time. It's because we can share a story about creating fire, and now everybody knows how to do it, right? And then we went from language, we went to graphics, we went from graphics to print, we went from there to audio to video to the internet. The previous forms of sharing the collective intelligence were only for sharing and distribution of collective intelligence. Now with AI, we actually create collective intelligence. We can ask AI and generative AI to create something that didn't exist before. And so that's another way of creating collective intelligence. In the distribution and the access to being able to create collective intelligence and distribute it has now been democratized, such that from the shop floor all the way up to the CEO, right, has access to the ability to create and disseminate collective intelligence. Now that is a game changer. That's a civilization changer. Just think about this. Does that make us that shrink the role of the human, or does it expand the role of the human? I think it's an unlimited expansion of the role of the human. So a question is, if you take this role of exponentiality and you take this role of software making everything cool again, now if I can put software on everything, my only constraint before was the number of software engineers to actually create that software. Now, with vibe coding, I can make anybody a software engineer. So we have unlimited supply of software engineers. They could be the CEO down to the plant manager, can actually request, the software to be written that does what they need. Now, is it going to give them a 100% solution? No. But it's a great way of capturing requirements and user documents and user stories by having the person who needs the software written for it describe that in a prompt. You hand that over to a professional so you can scale it and make it robust and make it cyber secure. Now I got something that's purpose built, designed by the CEO or designed by the plant manager or designed by the floor supervisor that meets their needs right there. And I can now make that scale. That's why I think I think this creates a world of limitless possibilities.
Yeah, you're very right. Actually, that reminds me on vibe coding, right? I mean, I think I mentioned this to you last time. At Cognizant, we are in the Guinness Book of World Records this year for having conducted the largest generative AI hackathon in the world ever. So we had a vibe coding event. 50,000 plus professionals joined, and people who had never coded, as you mentioned in the past, including C-level people, all the unit heads, they were all coding and using vibe coding because it doesn't require anything to actually start at. You put one of the platforms, GitHub or something, and then just start doing it. And there's so many ideas getting generated. Very relevant what you actually mentioned, just now. I think that's the way forward.
Yeah, that's a fantastic example of what other companies could do, and do this vibe coding exercise, capture all these things that may have never been done before, and now you have a way of creating something from the thoughts of your leaders. What a fantastic opportunity, and thank you guys for being the example for that, because I think it's a great example. It's something I think we should do elsewhere.
Absolutely. That brings us to our first mini segment, clarity break. The question out here, Earl, is what are the most persistent AI myths that you hear from leaders, and how do you tackle those?
Well, I go back to the original myths of IT, and And I think this is an interesting tool to help us tackle the original myths of IT. And I always talk about these myths, is that the myths of IT is you take twice as long, you cost twice as much, and you deliver half of what we want. So whether it's delivering managed services, whether it's delivering customized code and solutions, whether it is delivering, outcomes that our business need for growth or cost reduction or risk management, AI as an enabler of that is a tool that we can use to bust the traditional myths of IT. And I think the other myth is this idea of, ChatGPT is maybe created. It's not necessarily a myth as much as an illusion of ease, because ChatGPT is able to help me write a better letter, to my mother. It can help me run my business better. Well, not necessarily. So, help me reimagine my processes. So you can't just throw technology or ChatGPT or any AI at an existing process and have it miraculously get better. So what you need to do is do the necessary work. And I've created a term and I called it reimagineering. I think we've got to combine those two terms of re-engineering and imagineering and combine them and call it reimagineering our processes, our workflows in the world of AI that can now bring, again, this notion of collective intelligence and help us reimagine our processes in a way that delights our customers, provides ease of use and development for our developers. The practitioners within the processes can actually be exponential. So we're affecting the development of a business process. We're affecting the practitioners of a business process and the recipients. And if we can reimagineer that process, whatever it is, in the end with AI, we could unlock tremendous advantage.
Yeah. No, you're right. I mean, I think that is very true. We always feel that AI has got a very jagged edge, right? The things which you think are going to be very difficult, AI does it really, really, really easily. And the things which you think should be extremely simple to do, AI has a very difficult time to do it. So, I mean, I think the differentiation is going to lie in terms of reimagining some stuff, not think of it as a faster, better way of doing the same process. It's about reimagining the process with AI at the center of it, right? And because that's where the differentiation will lie. Which brings me to my next question, and it's very related to this, is I think it's a losing mindset to view AI itself as a differentiator, right? I mean, because I always feel that every company is successful for a certain reason. They have a unique DNA which makes them really good. Now, if you just use AI for the sake of AI, it kind of levels the playing field. And I think AI is important in terms of multiplying the good DNA exponentially and trying to level the playing field on the stuff which is not that great with the company, right? So that's how I think companies, leaders should look at AI. Instead of viewing AI itself as a differentiator, instead leverage AI as a complement to existing differentiators which that company has. I think you have a very similar philosophy, if I remember right. I mean, you always say about this AI plus U equal to exponential. So why don't you talk a bit about that particular philosophy of yours?
Sure. Yeah, and it banks on exponentiality, right? And that AI plus you makes you exponential. And I often say AI is not coming for your job, but the person using AI is, right? So why don't you be that person using AI? And it's often said, and I can't remember who quoted this, but it may be Alan Kay, but the idea was that the best way to create the best way to predict the future is to create it. Right. And so my challenge for you is to create a future that has you in it using AI, making you exponential. So that's the challenge out there for technology professionals, is how do you do that? And the way that I think about this is it's the same way that a hammer and a craftsperson becomes exponential, right? So a hammer in the hands of a person, who doesn't know how to use it just becomes a hammer. But a hammer in the hands of a craft person can become a utility that enables them to create beautiful outcomes, right? And so I often say it's not the hammer in and of itself, to your point, doesn't create value. It's the use of that hammer that creates value, right? And so I can use that hammer in good ways to build houses, that kind of stuff. I can use that hammer to break a window, right? And so there's two aspects of utilization of the hammer. One is the hammer doesn't inherently do anything good or bad, right? It's the wielder of the hammer that determines its outcome. And I think that gets us to another point here, is what are those new roles are going to be? What are the new jobs are going to be created? I think there's going to be a role for an AI artist. And an AI artist is somebody who's going to be able to take these tools, right? And create something beautiful with them. And they're going to be able to use multiple models. They're going to be able to use multiple agents. They're going to be able to use, multiple algorithms, and then they're going to create something beautiful with it. And that's the domain of the human, is to bring the artistry, the creativity to the utilization of the tool, the AI, and create something beautiful from it.
Very well said. Yeah, that's I haven't heard that one before. AI artist. I mean, yeah,
There
that
you
is
go.
very interesting. Yeah. So, changing tracks a bit, I mean, Cummins and Cognizant obviously are now collaborating on an operating model initiative that embodies many of the philosophies of the discussion we had. Now, you are the spearhead of this project. What takeaways can you share on how the right operating model unlocks the power of AI?
Well, I think one of the things that we're partnering on and what we've done, kind of from an operating model standpoint, is we've adopted the product platform operating model. And the goal of the product platform operating model is to really create a set of products that is focused on delivering outcomes for the end user. We want to create product teams, or what we call power cells. Actually, at Cummins, we call them the power cells. And our power cells are really designed to work with our business owners, with a set of strong, capable human beings working together and collaboratively to unlock the opportunities with the business. And so, those opportunities may be cost reduction, they may be revenue enhancement, they may be risk mitigation, but those are the fundamental outcomes that our businesses want. And then you're going to bring AI into the power cell as a tool, again, for those AI artists who are going to be members within those power cells to work with their end users to create those beautiful outcomes.
Yeah. And I think the way I feel, and I think you agree on this from what we had discussed, world is going to become more and more an ecosystem play, right? I mean, it's going to be like different companies are going to lean on others. If somebody tries to do it all alone, they're going to have a very difficult time doing it. That brings me to partnerships, and obviously our organizations, Cummins and Cognizant, have partnered now for 13 plus years. In your opinion, what are the key elements that help successful partnerships grow and adapt over time?
I think that's a great question, and I may reframe it just a little bit, just to think a little bit about where we are in our stage of evolution, just in terms of software. In the mainframe days, we made 20-year decisions, right? In the client server days, we made 10-year decisions. In the cloud internet-based days, we probably made 3 to 5-year based decisions. Now we need to make 90-day decisions, right? Things are moving so fast and so rapidly, right, that you have zero opportunity to just build it once and just have it last, right? And so what that means is we got to build composable modular architectures enabled by partnerships to help us to navigate the pace of change that's happening now.
Yeah, the pace of change is the fastest that it's ever been in human mankind, but it's also the slowest that it's going to be going forward.
That's right.
It's only going to change.
Yeah.
The 90 days today is going to change into 60, 30, 10,
60, 30, yeah,
1 day, hours.
Yeah. Oh, you use that agent? Oh, that was so last minute. So it's interesting. I've opined on this a little bit. I'm curious your thought too as well. And one of the things I've been thinking about is, was asked in another venue, and somebody said, "Well, when are we going to stop changing?" I'm like, okay. That's an interesting question. And I started thinking about that. And what I'm thinking is actually happening is we're moving from a period of episodic change to continuous change fueled by VUCA, that volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And change has always been constant. It just probably just hasn't been as apparent. And so the principles of agility, anti-fragility, and resiliency, and the underlying characteristics that make somebody agile, anti-fragile, and resilient is going to be some of those critical universal skills we're going to have to invest in and train in to actually not only survive but thrive in this world of continuous change fueled by VUCA.
Yeah, I actually say very often these days that when looking for the best talent, the main thing you need to look for is learnability, because whatever they know today is going to change tomorrow. So the only thing which actually matters is, can you learn something fast enough to be relevant tomorrow?
I love it. Learnability. I'm still that. That's learnability. So, and I think that's an interesting thing. And I'll maybe take a little tangent here, but I think this idea of learnability And I think, kind of working with organizations like Cognizant and others, and this idea about what do we owe our employees and what do we owe our kids. We owe them the ability to create learnability as a mechanism. And learnability, I think, gets maximized when we actually relook at the way we teach and educate our children. Because today we often teach the way the teacher best teaches versus teach the way the children best learn. And I think AI is a great way to democratize that and create adaptable content that understands how you best learn. Then you can really maximize learnability at the individual level by tailoring content to the way the student best learns.
Yeah, 100% agree. And that brings us to our second mini segment called Leader's Lens. So, Earl, stepping beyond technology, what central themes stand out from your own leadership journey as being key to navigating the change which you just talked about? And this change is going to be a continuum going forward, as you also mentioned.
The key thing that I've learned is that it's the people, right? And I call it a 3 tranche career. I spent, 10 years associated with the military. I spent 10 years in consulting, and I spent 20 years here in corporate America. And in each of those segments of my career, it's always been about the people. Learned in the military, it's about taking care of soldiers, right? And the way you take care of a soldier is you make sure they're equipped well, practiced well, and trained well. Because if they're that, they have the highest likelihood of coming back from a conflict unharmed or as safe as possible. You take that forward in the consulting, making sure that they're equipped well, trained well, and practiced well. Then when you deploy them to projects, they come back unharmed, right? And you do the same thing in corporate America, and they deliver outstanding results for our customers. And so, if you take care of your people, that's the magic.
Yeah, no, very well said. And for any IT organization or for companies like us in the system integrator and consulting space, our only assets are the people, right? I mean, and the better people, the better trained people you have, the better talent you have, and the better equipped they are with the tools, the better the entire ecosystem, the company, the organization will be. So, absolutely, completely agree with you. And it's multiplied exponentially for organizations like you and I, who should want to
Yeah.
lead.
Well, I often say, like, if knowledge is your capital, people is your resource. So invest in it and maximize that. You invest in people, you get maximum value of that knowledge capital.
Yeah. And now we come to the final part of our segment, and I wanted to get your opinion on this. Thinking big, right? And this is a stretch your imagination kind of question. So, what is a stretch your imagination perspective on AI that you would like our listeners to consider?
Wow. Stretch your imagination on AI. Well, I'm a bit of a geek and a Trekkie, so I
Oh,
will
it's
say that.
cracking me too.
Yeah, yeah. And there was an organization that actually whose research organization was designed to try to make the Starship Enterprise a reality. That's where I think our imagination should go. Should think about using sci-fi and science fiction as a beacon, and then turning our engines and innovation and our imaginations to how might we make that a reality. The universal translator, the engrams on the computers where they begin to interact in a more natural language way. And I think some of this stuff is closer, and some of this stuff is further away. But I do believe science fiction can serve as a beacon for our imaginations. And I'd be remiss if I didn't, champion another opportunity for AI. And we talk about this digital divide and what the digital divide actually means, just in terms of increasing the distance between the haves and the have-nots, right? And from a digital perspective, I think AI is another way of creating more equity in a world that's increasingly more divided. And that's my challenge for today is use AI for good. Use AI to help us close that divide. And I'm a co-chair of an organization called the techpact.org. So I will leave that for our audience to go look at the TechPact. That's TECHPACT.org and take the pledge. And one of the mission of the TechPact is this, is we envision a world where anybody who has a passion for technology ought to have the ability to succeed. And when we do that and we unlock the amazing talent that we have across the world, you can imagine what we can create. Again, like the vibe coding thing that you all did at Cognizant, we can do that now with 10 billion people. Now imagine what we could create if we create this great world of equity and access to technology, leveraging AI to unlock the imaginations and the creativity of all of our citizens, global citizens, to create a better outcome for this world. I mean, that would be Star Trekian to really make that happen. And I think AI is a way of doing it. And so I want to thank you, Vijay, for the platform for me to share that and create and enter that challenge out here. And can we create a world where everyone has access to the tools that they need to create the outcomes that they deserve?
Fantastic. What a noble thought, and what a fantastic idea and vision to have when thinking about AI. And can't think of a better person for that to come out from. Well, you can continue talking because you always talk like this when we meet, and time just flies by. Some of the stuff which you actually talked about, I think, will be very useful to the listeners. Thanks a lot, Al. I'll see you soon.
Thank you all.